Well, our reading from the Gospel of Mark this morning is from the very beginning, the very first verses of Mark. It reads, "The beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of God." How ironic that the good news begins in the wilderness, that it begins in the rough and uneven places, that it begins with the ancient cry of a displaced, homeless people. That's what Isaiah was writing about in our reading from Isaiah today. The year was 539 BC, some 48 years since the final destruction of Jerusalem at the hands of the Babylonians. They'd been carried off into exile. It was a world away from them. Jerusalem had been destroyed. Everything that had been their home was gone. And they'd been in Babylon now for generations. They had no idea what home was even like anymore. What they did know was that between them and home lay a vast desert, treacherous mountain passes, and dark and dangerous valleys. But it's interesting that Isaiah refers to it as a wilderness. He could have just said desert, but he chooses the word wilderness. In the Bible, they use that word, wilderness. You see, it's much, much more than a desert. When the Bible talks about a wilderness, it's something more profound. It's not just a wasteland. They considered it even the absence of God. You've heard the expression, no man's land. The wilderness is a place no man would want to go because it's so empty that you can't even find God there. God doesn't even go there. It's a God-forsaken place. So Israel had this wilderness between them and home. Well, John the Baptist takes that image of the wilderness and he takes it to another level. He says that the wilderness is also a place inside of us that's in our hearts. But do you know what that's like? To have a wilderness in your heart? To be a place in your life when you feel like God is absent, lost, hopeless, helpless, lonely, empty. We've all had those times in our lives when we feel like God just isn't listening. God isn't there. But John the Baptist says that God is going to do something about that. So he goes out into the wilderness, the place that symbolizes hopelessness, and he calls people to go out there, to go to the place people wouldn't dare to go. And they go to the wilderness. And he gives them a message, the same message that Isaiah gave so many years before. And what is that message? Well, there's a song I want to play for you today. And I think it helps us begin to understand what that message is. It's called Your Hands by J.J. Heller. Sometimes technology fails me. Talk about your wilderness, the plan for this song. The refrain of the song is what strikes me. It goes, "When my world is shaking, heaven stands. When my heart is breaking, I never leave your hands." That song is powerful to me because I've been in a place many times in my life where I felt like my world was shaking, like I was alone out there. The message of Isaiah and the message of that song and the message of John the Baptist is that those places in your life that you think are wilderness, where God isn't listening, that God couldn't possibly understand, those places don't exist anymore. Isaiah says, here is your God, right in the midst of the wilderness. When you think it's too difficult, the mountain is too high, got to level it out. And if the valley is too deep and it's too dark and you just can't climb out of it, God will fill it up. And if you can't find your way, God will lead you. And if you don't have the strength, God will carry you in his hands. God will pick you up and carry you in his arms like a lamb. There's no such thing as a place where God is absent. God is everywhere. God is here. God is in your heart. And that's the lesson of Advent. Preparing the way of the Lord means letting God fill your wilderness and even out the rough places. Letting God carry you when you can't do it yourself. You never leave his hands. Amen.